The sand seemed to be whimpering. I noticed a head in the dirt and initially dismissed it as a prop. But then it blinked. It was just a puppy, interred up to her neck in a mixture of sand and clay. She was motionless and silent, with one eye shut and the other twitching, letting out the faintest cry I have ever heard. A German Shepherd puppy had been buried alive. I was paralyzed, not from a lack of concern, but because I felt a rush of overwhelming care. It was incomprehensible. The beach was deserted, the wind was roaring, and there she was, half submerged, her head just above the ground, as if attempting to draw breath through the earth. I fell to my knees. My name is James, and I am no stranger to grim sights. I've witnessed war zones, catastrophic accidents, and the very worst of human nature. Yet, nothing had ever struck me with such force. We were situated just north of Monterey, California, in an area where cliffs curve into serene coves shielded by private estates and golf courses. This is my usual running route, the place I go to escape my feelings. That day, the sky was a clean, brilliant blue, the kind of perfect day you'd want to capture in a photograph until you saw her. I extended my hand toward her head, half expecting it to disappear. She did not flinch. One of her ears was plastered against her skull, while the other was barely discernible beneath a crust of sand. Her respirations, if one could call them that, were faint. Dirt caked her nose. One of her eyes was swollen completely shut. I scanned the area. There were no footprints nearby. But then I noticed it. 10 feet away, also partially buried, was a heavy, tied-off plastic garbage bag. A rage began to simmer within me. I started to dig frantically at the sand, my hands getting torn up by concealed pebbles. My fingernails bent back, but I didn't relent. She remained silent, simply watching. Her single open eye was fixed on me. How long had she been in this state? And what kind of monster could look a German Shepherd puppy in the eyes and entomb her alive? I continued to dig, speaking to her though I was unsure if she could even hear me. Stay with me, girl. You're not done. You're not done yet. But my progress was too slow. The clay was dense, hardened like concrete around her neck. I stripped off my shirt and began using it as a makeshift shovel, removing layers inch by agonizing inch. Every second felt borrowed. Then, her head lolled back too far. My heart seized. I leaned in close. No, no, no. Come on, baby. Come back. A moment passed, then another. And then, a sound barely louder than the wind. Another whimper. She was still with me. But for how much longer? I resumed digging with my hands. With no tools and no one to help, I was fueled by panic and surrounded by clay. It felt as if my fingers were splitting, but it didn't matter. I've been trained to survive in deserts and swamps, dropped from helicopters with only a knife. This, however, was different. This was a contest I could not bear to lose. With every handful I removed, her body seemed to sink further, the earth clinging to her as if it meant to keep her. I needed a better plan. I repositioned myself, wedging my arms deeper to try and break the hold of the earth without breaking her ribs. She didn't stir. Not a single tremble. Breathe, baby girl. Breathe. I kept whispering. Then I caught sight of it. Just one of her paws, twisted at a strange angle and covered in scratches, as if she had desperately tried to claw her way free. I snapped. Who did this to you? I yelled into the wind. Who? There was no reply, of course. Only the sound of waves breaking on the shore and the awful stillness of this small life, half buried. I persisted. Sand poured into my shoes. My knees were scraped raw. My heart hammered so violently I thought I might collapse. That's when I saw them. Boot prints leading from the incline down to the precise spot where she lay. These weren't the prints of hiking boots or surfer footwear. They were heavy work boots with deep, aggressive treads. They concluded right where the garbage bag was buried. I stood up just long enough to stumble over and wrench the bag from the sand. It was about half full with rotten food, old food containers, some sort of fabric, and a small red collar, its buckle still fastened. My stomach churned. This was no accident. Whoever abandoned this German Shepherd puppy had intended for her to vanish. I flung the bag aside and returned to her side. Her chest barely moved. One eye remained closed, the other still looking at me. I recalled what an old medic friend used to say. If they're warm, they can make it. I checked. She was still warm. Just barely. There was no time and no cell signal out here. I scooped my arms beneath her, lifting her gently. Her legs were unresponsive. Her head drooped to the side, completely limp. Hold on, I murmured, wrapping her in my sweat-drenched shirt. I've got you. You're mine now. She made the quietest noise, like air slowly seeping from a balloon. I raced back up the trail, my heart pounding and my lungs on fire. My truck was a half-mile away. I didn't slow down. I didn't glance back. She was feather-light in my arms, but it felt as though I was carrying the entire world. If she had held on this long, I refused to let her slip away now. She was still warm, if only slightly. That was all I needed to know. I slammed the truck door with my elbow, one arm securely around her. My keys fell to the ground. I didn't even swear, just grabbed them with trembling hands and started the engine. It sputtered, then roared to life. I floored the accelerator. Gravel shot out from the tires as we sped out of the lot above the beach, dust swirling behind us like a smokescreen. Mira, I hadn't decided on a name, but she felt like a Mira, lay nestled in my lap, swaddled in my shirt. Her fur was matted with dried sand and clay. One of her ears twitched once. I couldn't help but keep looking down at her. Her chest rose, then remained still for far too long before she took another shallow breath. Come on, baby. Keep going. I grabbed my water bottle and dripped a little onto my fingers, offering it to her. She didn't lap at it. The water just trickled down her cheek. The nearest vet was a 15-minute drive inland if I pushed the speed limit. I swerved around a slow-moving SUV, paying no mind to its blaring horn. Every bump in the road made me cringe, fearful it might harm something delicate inside her. Stay with me, I muttered aloud. You're not giving up. Not now. A few moments later, she moved her tongue, just a fraction. Then came a faint, breathy sound, a tiny, broken cry from deep in her throat. I nearly started crying right there. That sound meant she was still fighting, still part of this world. I took the turn onto Old Cypress Road too quickly, the tires squealing in protest. The vet's clinic was at the end of a long gravel driveway, situated behind a farm supply store. I stormed through the door as if I were carrying an explosive device. She's not breathing right, I yelled. She was buried. Please help her. A technician hurried over. The receptionist was frozen in place, her eyes wide. It's a puppy, I said, my voice cracking. A German Shepherd puppy, maybe 4 months old. Someone buried her alive. They asked no more questions, simply taking her from my arms and rushing her into the back. I stood in the reception area, my hands shaking and my chest heaving as though I'd just run 5 miles in full combat gear. I looked down at my shirt, balled up and filthy, marked with the imprint of her small form. Suddenly, I wasn't sure I could return to my truck. Not just yet, because if that little girl didn't survive, I didn't know what version of me would walk out of that waiting room. The door swung shut behind her, leaving me in solitude. The silence hit me with more force than the drive, more than the digging. There is a specific kind of quiet that pervades places where life is hanging by a thread, and that waiting room was filled with it. The ticking of the clock sounded like a gavel. The hum of the corner refrigerator was as loud as thunder. I managed to sit down, my knees protesting, stiff from the sprint through the sand. My hands were red and raw. I had a split-open knuckle that I hadn't even felt happen. All I could picture was her eye, the one that had remained open, watching me as I dug through the earth like a madman. That I wasn't just looking at me, it was trusting me. I've been labeled many things throughout my life: Marine, instructor, survivor. But at that moment, I was simply a man who was incapable of walking away. A German Shepherd puppy was buried alive, and for some inexplicable reason, I was the one who stumbled upon her. The vet emerged after what seemed like an eternity, but was likely no more than 10 minutes. Her scrubs were dusty, her expression neutral. She's hypothermic, she stated. Her temperature is dangerously low. We're administering warm fluids. One eye might be permanently damaged. Her front right leg is swollen, possibly fractured, but she's alive. I could only nod, unable to form words. She hasn't moved much, the vet continued, but she's fighting. That alone is quite remarkable. I swallowed hard, my voice finally returning. Can I see her? They escorted me to the back, where the lighting was dim and soft music was playing. The kind you hope animals can't hear, but believe might calm them. And there she was, wrapped in a thick towel on a heating pad, with a tiny oxygen tube near her nose. Her fur was cleaner now, but still patchy and lifeless. The swelling around her eye appeared worse under the light, but she was there. I sat next to her, not daring to touch, just observing. Her breathing was faint. Her legs were still, but then her ear twitched once, then again. And then her tail. It gave the slightest flicker. Not a wag, just a twitch, like a flame fighting not to be extinguished. That was it. That was what broke me. That tiny movement hit me with more force than any battlefield I had ever been on because it signified something. It meant she wasn't finished yet. I had promised myself I wouldn't love again, not after Lexi. She had been my partner, my shadow. 12 years of unwavering loyalty that concluded with a slow, peaceful goodbye on a rainy Tuesday. I held her head in my lap as the vet murmured gentle words I couldn't process. I kissed her muzzle one final time and felt a part of me shut down. After that, I swore I was done. No more dogs, no more farewells, no more holes in my heart that never truly mend. So, as I sat beside this broken German Shepherd puppy in that dimly lit recovery room, every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get out before I became too invested, before I made promises I couldn't honor. But I remained still. I watched her tail twitch again, observed the slow rise and fall of her chest, as if she were relearning how to breathe. I told myself I was just ensuring she was stable, that I would contact a rescue organization, make a donation, and be gone by the next day. But I was lying to myself. She had already burrowed under my skin. And when the vet returned to inform me that she had made it through the night, I felt a shift in my chest, as if it remembered how to feel hope. They explained she would need time, weeks of care in a secure, quiet environment to heal. She'll be blind in one eye, the vet added softly. But puppies are resilient. If she has someone patient, someone dependable, she'll be all right. I almost laughed. I was a survival instructor, for crying out loud. Patient, steady, prepared for the worst. But I wasn't prepared for her. They inquired if I wanted to name her. The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. Mira. The vet smiled. That's lovely. It means to see, I explained, even if it's with just one eye. And Mira, she moved when I said it. Just a little. Enough to let me know she heard. Or perhaps I just desperately needed to believe she did. Later that day, I sat next to her crate in the back of my truck. The ocean breeze drifted inland as the sun illuminated the hills before us. I looked at her, one eye closed, the other watching me, her chest rising and falling slowly and steadily. I didn't say it aloud, but the thought took shape anyway. You brought me back, too, didn't you? I wasn't just saving her. She was pulling me out as well. She stood on her own for the first time 4 days later. It was not an elegant sight. Her legs quivered like tree branches in a breeze. She propped herself against the crate wall, her good eye wide with bewilderment. But she was standing, and I held my breath. I had been carrying her outside each morning to lie in the sun, wrapped in towels like a delicate artifact. But on that day, she pushed herself up, unsteady, shaky, but with clear determination. Mira, I whispered. Her ear twitched. I crouched next to her, my arms ready to catch her if she stumbled. She looked at me, or perhaps through me. I couldn't be sure, and took a single step, then another. It was more of a shuffle, her injured leg dragging a little, but she was moving. A German Shepherd puppy with one functional eye, her ribs still visible beneath her soft fur, and paws scarred from sand and stone, was walking. She managed 2 feet before collapsing into my lap. I didn't mind. I held her as if she were made of glass and let out a laugh, the kind that takes you by surprise, a mix of pure joy and utter disbelief. You stubborn little thing, I murmured, burying my face in her fur. You're really doing it. That afternoon, I constructed a soft ramp for her using pillows and old blankets, leading from her crate to the porch. Every hour, I would find her sitting a little farther along it, observing, waiting. She never barked, not even once. But she tracked me with that one eye. When I prepared breakfast, she would scoot to the edge of the porch. When I was working in the garage, she would nudge the door open and curl up by my boots. By the 6th day, she took her first steps on the grass. By the 7th, she followed me to the front door and sat beside it, as if it were a lifelong morning ritual. I opened it just to see what she would do. She didn't pause. We walked out together onto the gravel path, the sunlight cascading over the hills like a promise. She moved with slow, deliberate steps, sniffing the air as if she owned it. I watched her stand at the edge of the field, the wind rustling her ears, her single eye fixed on the horizon. It was in that moment I knew. She remembered the beach, the sand, the feeling of suffocation. But she was no longer afraid of it. She had walked out of her own grave. And now, she was learning to live again. We returned to the beach on the 10th day. The same location, the same stretch of sand where I had found her buried, where her head had barely cleared the clay. It wasn't planned. My truck seemed to steer itself that way, as if it had unresolved matters to attend to. Mira sat next to me in the passenger seat, nestled in a cocoon of blankets. Her head was resting on the door, her ears attentive. That one open, I scanned the world as if it demanded answers. As we arrived at the overlook, I felt a tightness in my chest. What was I doing? She had made so much progress. Was I about to traumatize her all over again? But when I opened her door, she did something unexpected. She jumped down, not with speed or strength, but with purpose, as if she knew exactly where we were and wanted to be here. We walked deliberately across the sand. The tide was low, the wind blowing in our faces. That same patch of earth where someone had attempted to extinguish her life now looked peaceful, clean. But I could still envision it, the place from which she had risen. Mira came to a halt right at the spot. She sniffed the ground, sat down, and simply stared. She wasn't trembling or hiding, just existing. I sat down beside her. Neither of us moved for a long while. Gulls cried out above us. The waves seemed to whisper more softly than I recalled. Then, abruptly, she stood, took a few steps forward, and began to run. Running. Her legs were still wobbly. Her path was erratic, like a toddler discovering their balance. But she ran, circling me across the sand, toward the water and then away from it. Tears clouded my vision so much I could barely see. But then her bark, sharp, sudden, and joyous, cut through the air. Her very first bark. She turned, raced back to me, and collided with my chest. I caught her, buried my face in her fur, and laughed like a man who had forgotten how to cry. That day, something shifted. The place intended to be her grave had become her playground. This was where someone had tried to terminate her story, and she had transformed it into her beginning. This was no longer her place of terror. This was her kingdom. I saw those boots again. It was a bright, warm Wednesday morning. Mira and I were walking the upper trail near that same beach, the one where the cliffs overlook the ocean and runners pass with their headphones and sports drinks. She trotted at my side, her gait still slightly uneven but confident. Her ears would perk up at the sight of every passing gull. Then I saw him, a tall man in a gray hoodie, cargo pants, and heavy black boots with deep treads, the kind you wouldn't wear on a beach unless you were carrying or burying something. Mira stopped dead in her tracks. Her body became rigid. She didn't let out a growl or a bark. She just stared. My stomach sank. I glanced down. Her tail was stiff. One paw was lifted slightly from the path. Her breathing, previously calm, was now shallow and rapid. I followed her gaze. The man walked casually along the edge of the trail, looking around, not at the scenery or the sky, but at the ground. He noticed us, offered a smile and a nod, and continued on his way. I didn't return the gesture. I looked at Mira, who hadn't budged. Her eye was fixed on him like a targeting laser. I knelt beside her. "You okay, baby girl?" She blinked, moved closer, and pressed her side against my leg. I stood up and watched him vanish around the bend. Every fiber of my being wanted to follow him, to demand answers, to take action. But all I had was a pair of boots and a gut feeling. I filed a report with the local police department that afternoon, providing a description, the time, and every detail I could recall. They were courteous, saying they would review camera footage from the road above the cliffs, but it led nowhere. And I knew it might not. Some monsters get to walk free. But this time, Mira wasn't by herself. Every morning after that, we continued our walks on the beach, passing the old cove. But now she carried her head a bit higher, stayed a little closer, and watched a little more carefully. They had buried her once, but they would not intimidate her again. It began with a flyer at the feed store. Service dog program for veterans. Now accepting applications. I stared at it for a long while. Mira sat at my feet, engrossed in watching a lizard scale the siding as if it were a major event. I didn't take the flyer. I didn't need to. The words were already embedded in my mind. That evening, I sat on the porch with Mira curled beside me. The stars were out in a clear, endless, and honest sky that you only see far from the city. I sipped my coffee and looked down at her. "You think you're ready to help somebody else?" I asked. She blinked at me, a single long, slow blink, her good eye shining in the moonlight. I remembered how she had rested her head on my chest the night I brought her home, how she pressed against me as if she could sense the burdens I carried, and I thought, maybe she already had. So we applied. The trainer raised an eyebrow upon seeing her limp and her scarred eye. She's been through hell, I explained. But she didn't stay there. They consented to an evaluation. The training sessions took place at a ranch outside of Salinas, a place with open fields, shaded barns, and a quiet atmosphere designed for healing. Mira adapted as if she had been preparing for it her entire life. She walked alongside veterans who hadn't spoken for days. She rested her head on the lap of a man who jumped at every sudden noise. She curled up at the feet of a woman who had lost her husband and hadn't left her home in a year. She didn't bark, beg, or push. She simply remained present, steady, and still. One afternoon, a Vietnam veteran in a wheelchair began to cry when she licked his hand, saying he hadn't touched a dog since 1978. On another occasion, Mira lay beside a Marine experiencing severe tremors. After 15 minutes, his hands grew still. The trainers took me aside. "Your girl has something special," one of them said. "She's not just calm. She can read a room before she even enters it." I nodded. I already knew. What she had endured had become her strength. This German Shepherd puppy, once buried in silence, had discovered her voice in the quiet and was now helping others find theirs. It occurred during the third week of training. We were at the Veteran Center, a small, sun-drenched building surrounded by oak trees. Mira and I had been working with a group of men and women who visited weekly, some cheerful, some withdrawn, all carrying invisible loads. That day, something felt different. One of the younger veterans, a man named Lucas, sat by himself in a corner, his fists clenched and his eyes wide with distress. He hadn't said a word since the program began. Mira had approached him before, always with caution, but he had never acknowledged her, until that moment. A sharp pop echoed from outside. A dropped clipboard or a slammed car trunk. Whatever the source, it split the air like a gunshot. Lucas recoiled violently, his chair tipping backward. He slammed his hands on the table. "Get back!" he yelled, his voice breaking. Everyone, including the trainers, froze. Everyone except Mira. She moved. Not quickly, not fearfully, but with a steady purpose. I held my breath. She walked directly toward him, one deliberate step at a time, her head lowered and her tail still. Upon reaching him, she didn't jump or lick. She simply sat down at his feet. Lucas's breathing was ragged. His hands were shaking. One of the trainers began to move forward, but I raised my hand. "Wait." Mira tilted her head and then rested it, that beautiful, scarred, gentle head, right on his knee. A long, heavy silence filled the room. Lucas looked down at her. No words, no movement, just a fixed stare. Then his hand stirred, trembling, hesitant, but it moved. He placed it on her head. His shoulders slumped as if he'd been holding up the world. Then the tears came, quiet, broken sobs that shook him from his core. And with them came the first words we had ever heard from him. She's not afraid of me." I blinked back my own tears. Mira remained still. She stayed right there, her eye closed, her breathing slow, grounding him like an anchor in a storm. Afterward, the trainer pulled me aside. "I've worked with dozens of dogs," she said. "But that was something else." I nodded. I couldn't have helped that man. But she did. With a single touch, a single choice, a single moment of understanding what he needed when no one else did. That German Shepherd puppy, once buried alive and fighting for air through sand, had just saved a man's life. I wasn't prepared, but I belonged to her. After all that had happened, I believed I could maintain some emotional distance, be her handler, her trainer, her safe harbor. But Mira had different intentions. On the day we graduated from the program, they presented me with her official certification vest. It was red, with a silver tag stitched to the side that read, "Service Dog, Mira." I fastened it on her. She stood perfectly still, looking proud, as if she understood its significance. And perhaps she did. Perhaps she always had. When the applause subsided, a coordinator approached me and asked, "Are you planning to formally adopt her or place her with someone else in need?" I answered without a second thought. "She's home," I said. "She's staying with me." The words came as a surprise even to me, but once spoken, I knew they had been true all along. That evening, we walked along the beach again, on that same cruel stretch of sand that had once tried to claim her. This time, however, she led the way, head held high, her steps confident. Her one eye was fixed on the horizon as if it were hers to command. We arrived at the spot, the very one. I had marked it with a small wooden post I'd driven into the ground with a rusty mallet. I knelt beside it and carved into the wood with my knife. Hope was buried here and dug itself out. Mira pressed her body against my side, warm and serene. We remained there until the sun sank low and painted the sky gold. Later that night, I awoke to find her not in her bed, but curled up next to me, her head resting on my chest, her breath slow, steady, and safe. And I recognized a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to have in years. I was alive, truly, fully living, not just breathing, because of her. This German Shepherd puppy, blind in one eye, limping on a healed leg, with a heart more resilient than any war I had faced, had brought me back. She wasn't just my dog. I was her human. She was buried, but she rose again. From a grave of silence and sand, this German Shepherd puppy fought her way back to existence. In doing so, she restored life to me as well. What began as a rescue evolved into something more profound, a partnership, a promise. She taught me that healing is not a linear process. It involves stumbling. It involves limping. It begins with a whimper. But if you pay close attention, if you lean in, you can hear it breathing. Mira demonstrated that strength is not found in muscle or authority. It lies in remaining gentle after the world has tried to make you hard. It's in the willingness to trust again, even with one eye closed. This is not a story defined by pain. It is a tale of rescue and recovery. It is a story about hope, healing, and the power of second chances. This is a narrative of a loyal German Shepherd's rehabilitation, one who rediscovered hope and then shared it with others. Mira was once left for dead. Now, she walks beside veterans who live in silence, who cannot sleep, who bear wounds that no one can see. She finds them. She sits with them. She waits. And in her own way, she communicates, "You are not alone." This little girl's journey from cruelty to compassion has transformed more than just one life. Her story, from abandonment to rehabilitation, underscores the vital importance of nonprofit rescue organizations. Caring for a rescued puppy is about more than just love. It is a profound responsibility and a commitment to their well-being. Mira's story is a testament to the dogs still waiting to be found, reminding us that there is a voice for them and there is hope.